Welcome to Pushing Forward with Alicia, a podcast that gives disability a voice. Each week, we will explore topics like confidence, ambition, resilience, and finding success against all odds. We are creating a collective community that believes that all things are possible for all people. Open hearts, clear paths, let's go. Welcome back to Pushing Forward with Alicia. I'm Alicia Anderson. I think I'm going to start with a quote. A lot of disabilities are invisible, but our reactions to them are not. There's a lot of disabilities that are out of sight, out of mind. They're invisible, they're non-apparent. And I found this statistic that there's an estimated 133 million Americans have some type of chronic illness or hidden disability. And that equates to literally almost half of our population. And this conversation is picking up steam like crazy in our society and the workplace today. It's coming across my desk, non-apparent versus apparent disability. And I like to tie in the combination of both because the non-apparent pieces of my disability has been literally the hardest part. And our guest today is Kimberly Daya. So I was on Kimberly's podcast last week. It is called Humanity Unlocked. If you have not seen it, you or heard it, or both, you need to go and check it out. She's a mom and a wife, and she was also diagnosed with Lyme disease. And she's been kind of adapting to her new normal over the past 10 years. There's a lot of stigma that comes with non-apparent disabilities. So, Kimberly, thank you for being so willing to come and talk about your everything.
Thank you. I'm truly grateful. So thank you so much.
So I think we just need to start with whatever you're comfortable with, sharing your journey with maybe pre and post diagnosis and how that has impacted your life.
So in 2007 is when I initially knew that something had gone horribly wrong. I was only married a year at that point to my husband, Mark. And just to say it very plainly, I woke up one day and my legs were weak. And I went to the gym a lot back then, like 5 days a week. So I just thought, gosh, my legs are weaker than usual. I don't remember working them harder than I've ever worked them, but okay. And but what was different about this time was they got weaker every day. I was at work and I was at my desk chair. I was a property manager at the time, and I went to stand up, and I kept falling back down. Like my legs wouldn't hold me. So my assistant said, who is also a good friend of mine still to this day, she said, we got to take you to the ER. Like something's wrong. This has been happening. It's been getting worse. It could be, and she just threw out, could be MS. And I was like, well, what is, I was 28. So never had any health issues to speak of. And I didn't even know what MS was. And so she and my maintenance manager wheeled me out into my car in my desk chair because I couldn't walk. And so long story short, they run all the tests. I'm there for, I think, 2 nights, and nothing was conclusive. So by the time I left the hospital, I had improved. So I just thought, oh, okay, that was weird. About a month later, maybe a few weeks later, it came back, but it came back in my arms. So I was like at my desk writing, and I noticed that I couldn't hold on to my pen. And so then that was the next thing. And then it just kept snowballing. So then it was like, not just my grip, then it was my arms. I couldn't raise my arms to like wash my hair or like put my top on, and then it would go back into my legs, and then it was my legs and my arms. And so what ended up happening was we started to see a pattern of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And so this all started at the end of July, and by December I was fully immobile, and I went out on disability, like short-term disability, to try to figure out what was wrong. And in the interim, I had gotten pregnant with who's now 16-year-old daughter. And so I went into like a little bit of a remission. The symptoms were alleviated because during pregnancy, with an autoimmune illness, your immune system is suppressed during pregnancy because everything's going to the baby. So the autoimmunity of this illness was went dormant. So I had energy. By 5 months in, I was doing great. And then a month after she was born, it all came rushing back, but like with a vengeance. So initially I was diagnosed with MS a year after that first visit in 2007. So in 2008, my neurologist said, this is MS, we're going to treat you for MS. So from 2008 to 2013, I was diagnosed and was treating with injectables, Copaxone to be specific, for MS, taking Cortef, which is a corticosteroid. And then in 2012, they started the conversation of Lyme disease came up.
Why do you think that there's a stigma, even in like the medical field, about like kind of discrimination and difficulty giving care because of the diagnosis and the symptom? Like, am I going down the right track with that? Because I started reading about it. I was like, whoa.
100%. Lyme disease is difficult to diagnose, one, because the testing is terrible. It's not good. And I don't know why it's so awful, but it's terrible testing. And if you want to get really accurate testing, you have to pay out of pocket and go to a specialty lab to get that done. I ended up going to IGeneX, which is where I got diagnosed with the Western blot and the ELISA tests and that our typical allopathic system does. I was negative, but that's part of it, is the testing is awful. And I think the other aspect of it where physicians really treat us not well is because a lot of patients who have done their homework, like myself and many others who are just desperate, they want to get well, they want answers, will come in desperate and insist this is what they have and insist that they do more about it. And the physicians don't like it. It's just like, I'll use one of the lines you said, it's like salted with adversity. Like it's just not easy. It's not an easy thing to navigate, but there is such a thing as Lyme literate doctors, LLMDs, who there's actually practices that they open up because they are professionals at knowing how to test, knowing how to treat each one individually.
I know you and others deal with a lot of judgments and assumptions and unknowns about your chronic illness. Can you talk a little bit about how this has shaped your life and your perspective?
In the beginning, it was such a shock to my system when I realized that this is chronic, this isn't going anywhere. And this was like prior to even social media. So like Facebook came on, or I went online, I should say, at Facebook in 2009. And in my Facebook memories, I can see by 2010, I am desperate. I'm shouting from the rooftops because I am so alarmed that this is happening. And I'm talking about it and I'm posting about it and I'm posting pictures of myself sick. And I'm like WTF, like this is ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. And for me, it was a little bit hard after a couple of years when you realize that people I won't say they lose interest, but it's just like anything else. Like the conversation gets tiring for people to have, and it's tiring for me to have. But if I stop talking about it, then how am I ever going to get well? And then at that point, I just said, I need to learn how to deal with this internally. So I just kind of took that as my cue to like, this is something that I'm on my own journey here.
That's the isolation of disability. That's ableism. One word that sticks out of what you just said to me was judgment. You say something like, the difference between empathy and judgment is knowing the story, the path, and trying to understand somebody else's journey and what they're going through. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think that people's tolerance and their empathy, they have their own lives. So I can't expect somebody to react with the same fury that I have. And I think that realization was hard. I think for me, because of what I've gone through, my empathy has really increased. I have learned, because I had so much experience with feeling like nobody was putting themselves in my shoes, I am constantly reminding myself to put myself in others' shoes. So one of the things that a lot of people with like chronic fatigue, one of the main issues that a lot of us have is like, you say you're tired and people will go, oh, me too. Or or we're all tired, and this is like lassitude fatigue. This is a completely different kind of fatigue that is, it is, if you think about like being on sleeping pills and having the flu at the same time, it is so all, it's like comparing a normal headache to a migraine. It's like you can't. So that gets a little bit frustrating because people think that they know what you're going through, and and that's fine, except it can feel like they're minimizing your experience.
Or they actually are.
This is a perfect time to take a quick break. You are listening to Pushing Forward with Alicia, and we will be right back.
We talk a lot on the show about ableism and inclusion. If you want to learn more, I invite you to listen to my TEDx talk, Disabling Ableism, the Modern Pathway to Inclusion. You can watch the whole speech on aliciaanderson.com. That's ALYCIA Anderson with an O.com. Click on speaking. There's a lot of disabilities that are out of sight, out of mind. They're invisible, they're non-apparent. I think that's a good segue to the conversation and the distinction and what you kind of face with the distinction in itself between a visible disability and a non-apparent disability. And there is a lot of judgment.
Yeah.
How has that been?
I think that obviously it's easy for someone like me to blend in the crowd. Obviously, that is, I guess if you want to look at what is good about having invisible disabilities, because I don't have to talk about it. I don't have to deal with people. There's so much that you have to encounter every day that I don't. So there's a discrepancy. There's a difference there. The downside of it is that if I have to explain to one more person why phone conversations are hard unless we schedule them ahead of time, there had to come a point where I had to stop caring and I had to start thinking about what was best for my own health and stop worrying what people thought about me. And that was freeing. That took a while, though. It took a long time.
I know that people with hidden disabilities can hide them, but sometimes that hiding them can also be a detriment for you to really truly be who you are, because you're being placed in this like able-bodied, I'm air quoting, normal situation when you're really masking a lot of things that are underneath that are really hard to navigate your life. And so how can we tell the general public that I have an invisible disability? I'm parking in this disabled spot in front because when I come out of Target, my limbs are exhausted. What is the message to the judgment?
Something I talked about in my TED talk that I did in March is the idea of like having how we all have a point of reference. We only know what we know. Like we only know things based on our own experiences with them. You're going to have a very unique point of reference and approach to life and how you see things based on your experiences. Same with me and everybody, race, sexuality, all that plays into our own point of reference and the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves in the world. And I think that if we stop to look at situations, instead of looking at through the lens of our point of reference, start to try to see it from their point of reference, I think that's where empathy, I think, comes from, putting yourself in their shoes. One of the things I mentioned in my TED talk is like a correlation I made was we all know what it means to like hindsight's 2020, to make a decision that you thought was good at the time. And then fast forward 5 years and you look back and you go, wow, what a terrible decision that was. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And if you can sort of look at it that way, like, have you ever made a decision that you thought was good or that you thought was right and then realized it wasn't? It's the same thing. Like there's no way to understand something that don't have no experience with, that you're not navigating in the world the same way. And so I think my advice is to practice listening.
Give me some of the characteristics and some of the power that's come out of this diagnosis and who you are.
And this is where it gets really interesting because I really cursed it for so long and I hated it. I hated my wheelchair. I told you I never wanted to leave my house. Because it was like saying goodbye to the old me every time I had to rely on help and the wheelchair. And it felt like such a departure from who I've always been. So I spent years in isolation and I think that the years of isolation, self-imposed isolation, caused me to slow down long enough to hear my own thoughts, to feel my feelings, to become more self-aware, to see the aspects of my illness that were positive. I'm home with my kids now. I was so driven and motivated when my kids were little that I would have missed so much. So I look at it as a gift. That's a good part of my illness it's given me. I also think that it's made me a better wife in weird ways. I am very available to be there for him in his crazy, busy real estate broker life. And he is always been there for me. That's never, from day one, he's been a person that's just very emotionally available and eagerly wanted me to lean on him and was okay with it. So I allowed me to reciprocate that. So we actually joke about it now. It's like, if I wouldn't have gotten sick, do you think we'd still be together? Only because our connection wouldn't be as strong. What I went through doesn't come close to what most people have to deal with. This is a life ruiner, Lyme disease. And any real autoimmune illness, it will completely change the trajectory of where you thought you were going. So, yeah, and I realize that.
And I think you've turned it in, though, to something really beautiful and positive, and you do have a beautiful marriage. So let's talk about the podcast. The first thing I want to know is why the title and the theme, Humanity Unlocked.
So it's interesting because during the divisiveness that occurred mostly 2020 to 2022, I found myself just paying attention to behaviors just across the board, how people reacted, and just taking note and watching like when something stood out to me. And what stood out was that people were each picking their sides and their teams or whoever they aligned with or whatever they aligned with, whatever ideology or person or president, whatever. But what I realized was there was a couple times when somebody would make an allowance. Like this side was the devil, or these people were the devil, but this person who's also on the side, they're okay. Why are they okay? Because they saw their humanity. Like if I can bring on people that are not like me as much as possible and showcase their humanity so you can actually see past whatever label you want to put on them, we may realize that we are more in common and more alike than we know. And I think was the mission from the beginning. I think that people judge things they don't understand. And the minute you hear somebody's testimony or their story or whatever, suddenly you might feel differently. And so it's always about seeing the person as a person and not an issue or a label. And a lot of the guests I have on my podcast feel like nobody understands. And while some of us may never understand, at least I'm giving them the platform to try to allow people to step in their shoes for just a second and see their humanity in their story.
You've created a platform for people to share their story, to remove judgment and invite in empathy and understanding. And I think that comes from the outsider looking in. It comes from your path, all of the things that you've gone through to get some understanding of who you are today in this moment, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's really hard when people don't see your intention. Like you're doing something they don't agree with, and we're not always going to agree. And I always say that. But if you could just step back and look at what this person is intending, like what is the intention behind it, and see it from their intention, you may still not agree, but at least you'll see the intention and you'll understand that at least they're coming from a good place.
You're doing really good work with your podcast. It's very well done. Okay, did we miss anything?
If you want to come on and tell your story, look and see what we've already covered. And if we haven't, reach out because there's really not much I won't touch.
Okay, and the title of your TED Talk too, what is that?
It's called Dismantling Judgment and Embracing Nuance.
Thank you so much for being so vulnerable to share your story. I think this story is going to impact a lot of people.
Thank you.
It's the time. So we end the show with Pushing Forward moment. It's a little mantra. It's a little nugget of inspiration. Is there something that you live by that you can share with our audience?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I really do feel like I live by trying to see things not just from my own perspective. It's just once you realize that we are all very different on different paths, we all have a different journey in this life. That's going to include things that somebody will never know. And what their path includes is something that you'll never know. And once you understand that, really understand that, you can start to see, like, you judge less and you'll lean into curiosity. I think my thing is put judgment on the back burner or check judgment at the door and lean in with curiosity. And you really can't lose with that.
Thank you so much for
You.
just being you and now being my friend and in my life. I'm so grateful. And thank you to our community for joining us again this week. This has been Pushing Forward with Alicia, and that is literally how we roll on this podcast. If you're an employer who would like to learn more about disability inclusion in the workplace, lessons on ableism, and how accessibility can drive innovation in your company, please check out my micro training series at aliciaanderson.com. That's ALYCIA Anderson with an O.com. Click on micro learning.